I'm Dr. Thad Fever. I am one of the chiropractors here. Just to your left down the hall, the important room on this side. I'm one of the young up-and-coming ones to help these older guys out. Anyway. Just kidding. Please don't post it. Today, with our Dinner with the Docs programs, I'm going to be talking about adapting, which basically means I'm talking about stress. We all experience, raise your hand if you have stress. If you know what stress is. Raise your hand if you experience it today. Raise your hand if you think you're experiencing it now. But in a chiropractic office, we can't talk about stress without talking about subluxation. So subluxation is our most important topic. I mean, but we talk about that later. We talked about that before. I'm not going to hit on it too much right now. But subluxation is our bone out of position that puts pressure on a nerve. We cannot have subluxation without nerve pressure. That's the most important thing. Subluxation happens for a reason. Stresses. Physical stress. Let's talk about that. That's obvious. Here's a little video about physical stress. Slips, falls, trauma, anything. Yep. I don't know how to get volume on here, so bear with me. I don't know why it's not playing. There we go.
Which one is playing?
Alright, so the funny thing about that is yeah, it's funny and everything. Haha, we can laugh and everything. But we're all here, we're all getting adjusted. How many of those people do you think left and were like, oh, after that, I need to go see the chiropractor? They're going through that. And you know what it's like to be subluxated and have that pressure on the nerve? You think those people are subluxated now? Yes, absolutely. That's the sad thing. Mental stress. We have our daily stressors. Work, kids, traffic, whoever on your way over here that flipped you off when you cut them off on the interstate. You know, that's stress. Because we're experiencing someone disliking us or just that stressful situation, that stressful feeling. Emotional stress. I like videos today, apparently. That's what makes me laugh too.
I'm keeping it in my bathroom at the motel, reading an old pizza. Get in car, you hear me? I'm getting in that car.
That's probably more for my entertainment. So
Lower your heart rate.
who says that guy's not emotionally stressed right now? He's about to get in the car with the cougar. Chemical stress, food that we eat, stuff that we put in our body. You know, we're living in a different world than what we used to live in. You know, everything's fast-paced, everything's got to happen. We got to go eat right now so we can get the kids to soccer. We got to eat standing up. We eat over the sink. We eat whatever. You know, we grab food in the bag. We're eating good food in the bag tonight. We grab it from a drive-thru, and it's not even food. You know, so we're putting this stuff in our body, and our body doesn't recognize it, and it's stressed, trying to break it down and figure out what to do with it, which half the time is nothing. Caffeine.
Well, it turns it to fat.
There, it does that. There you go. I like that, friend. Point out your name for everybody. Caffeine. I'm not going to make everybody raise their hand and say who drinks caffeine, but caffeine, stressor. You know, chemical stress in the body. It causes. We'll get a lot more into that as we get rolling. that just stimulates the adrenals to release adrenaline, which is our stress hormone, and cortisol, a stress hormone. You know, it's like putting an artificial stress in the body. Food that we don't eat. Who skips breakfast? Who skips lunch? A lot of people. You know, a lot of people just eat dinner. By skipping meals, it puts our body into a survival mode, causing stress on it, and the body then stores body fat. So, all those things are stress. All those things that lead to our subluxation is stress. And stress, right there, so 75 to 90% of all doctor's visits are stress-related. OSHA declared that stress is a hazard of the workplace and costs the American industry more than $300 billion annually, and a lifetime prevalence of an emotional disorder is more than 50% due to chronic unrelated stress. So stress wreaks havoc on our world. Stress just puts us in just bad positions. I don't even know how to describe it. Stress is not good. But the bad thing is that we can't avoid stress. You know, we're constantly encountering stress. You know, so that's why we're talking about stress today. So this is just kind of scratching the surface of it. So stress, the first connection of stress and health was in the 1930s by a scientist named Hassel. He said that stress is a strain experienced by a living organism in their struggles to adapt and cope with the changing environment. The body has a primitive response to stress, and that's called fight or flight. Who's heard of that from psychology or whatever class that you learned in? So fight or flight is the body's response to stress, like I just said. All right, so back primitively, you know, before we had cars, before we had computers, before we had whatever, man was looking for food. Man saw a bear. Bear said, "I'm going to eat you." Man was like, "How do I get out?" So our body's designed, or our brain, right here. So here's man. He's happy. He's looking for food. Here's bear. I don't know how to draw a stick-figure bear. I'm going to try it. Well, he's happy because he's about to eat. Wants to eat man. Man no longer happy. Man's sad. Signal from the brain tells the kidneys, or the adrenal glands on top of the kidneys, it's like a little hat on the kidney, to release stress hormone. That stress hormone will increase the heart rate, increase respiration, and increase the glucose in the blood. So it gives the body fuel to run, it gives you air to breathe, and it increases the heart rate to get the blood to all the major muscle groups, so you can see that bear, turn around, and haul out of there as quick as you can. So man's big goal is to run away. Consequently, what that does is burns off the stress hormone. Right? So the cortisol and the adrenal and the adrenaline and everything released by that body, the fight or flight. So basically, man is amped up by all these chemical reactions to either fight the bear, good luck, or fly away. So we don't have wings, so in other words, we run as fast as we can through the woods and up a tree, or play dead. But the body releases cortisol, another stress hormone, in response to the adrenaline that's going to increase everything to make man run away. So the cortisol, what it does is it decreases digestion, it decreases reproduction, it decreases cellular growth, so all the body's energy is focused on saving itself and getting out of there as quick as possible. But the problem that we have with that is when stress is constant. You know, so back in the day, we didn't have as many stressors. You know, we had this kind of situation, and I don't mean back in the day like in the 30s, but back in the day, we had these kind of situations, and the body would deal with itself and get out of there, and man could be happy and find his food to eat. You know, he gets away from the bear. So that's when stress was infrequent, and then the body would readjust back to normal. So after about 50 or 60 minutes, the body finds a baseline and it's back to normal. It's calm, it's collected, man's okay. But continued stress convinces the brain to perceive more danger. So the more stress that we're in, the higher our alert goes. You know, so if you think about setting that set point, you know, I'm not a very stressed person. I'm constantly under stress, constantly under stress. You ever find a person who's been stressed out all day and you try and get them about something, they're snippy and snappy at you? That's because they're constantly in that fight or flight. Right now they're not going to run away from you, but they're going to yell at you. And so they're wanting to fight with you. Not to kill you because you're a bear, but just to, they're on edge. That adrenaline's there, but it's just telling their brain that they're under a stressful situation. So the problem with that is no longer you're being attacked by a bear. So stress initially is positive. You know, it's something positive that we want to have. It saves our life. So everybody raised their hand earlier and said that they had stress, right? Who recently has been attacked by a bear? Other than Mr. Gabb.
Oh, that was you.
Okay. So it's a positive reaction. It's something that our body is designed to do. It's something that our body does to save us. But we don't encounter those stresses anymore. You know, so our stresses anymore are those mental stresses, those chemical stresses, those emotional stresses. You know, people putting the wrong food in their body. Not people putting it in your body, but yourself putting the wrong food in your body. You know, encountering that stress at work when the numbers don't add up, or when the computer breaks down, or when we don't have batteries for the camera, you know, or when you have to give a presentation in front of a whole bunch of random people. You know, those kind of stresses still wreak havoc on the body. You know, it's not this type of thing anymore, but the body doesn't differentiate in between stress. Stress is stress. It's always going to take that information that you're giving it to stress it and try and save itself, but also this build up of stress has nowhere to go because we're not reacting to stress the same way that it happens. You know, so when that computer crashes, your initial instinct is not to run away. You have to sit there and you got to fix it. You know, so this stress accumulates. So this cortisol, this stress hormone, accumulates and just beats down the body. You know, so that chronic stress, this prolonged exposure, makes it so our body forgets how not to be stressed anymore. Oh yeah, here's another good slide. So there's the balance. Our body's always trying to maintain homeostasis and be balanced. Right? So we have balance, we have calm, relaxation, comfort, and ease. Mild tempered, everything. You know, so when we're stressed, our fight or flight, and we get out of there from the bear, everything just amps up. You know, so we see more people living on this side of the spectrum. You know, anxiety and everything. Everything that you can think of as stress. I mean, how many people do you just see throughout the day that you're just like, not very pleasant to be around because they're up here all the time and not very happy in the fall? Those people are under stress, you know, so it's not their fault. Kind of is sometimes. But it's not their fault, it's just how that stress is affecting their body. Here we go. Cortisol, that stress hormone. Like I said earlier, decreases that digestion, decreases reproduction, decreases cellular growth, and decreases your immune function. So imagine that over time. This cortisol, if we don't burn it up because we're not running away from our stress, it wreaks havoc on the body. Many problems down the line. You know, so hormones get out of balance because of that cortisol, because of our decrease in our reproductive hormones. You know, so our hormones are all out of gear. Our adrenals are just fatigued and burnt up because that constant communication from the brain telling your adrenal glands to release that adrenaline, and it's constantly doing that, and there's no more to give. You know, because we're constantly under stress. I mean, it's probably the most common thing in the world. We probably see more people just throughout the day, throughout here, from, did I already say this, or was I just thinking it as I was talking? See more people just throughout the day here that are suffering from that emotional, chemical, and physical, and mental stress. You know, not everybody's had that physical stress of everybody falling off the merry-go-round and the swing set. You know, but everybody's stressed throughout the day just because of whatever. You know, so eventually down the line, I feel like I've seen a lot of this week, is people want to find out about hormone replacement because of that stress. You know, so we have Dr. Brianna and I went to a ribbon cutting down the street right here for this hormone replacement clinic. You know, it's a great place, and they probably mean well and everything, but they're sitting there trying to tell us that they're a wellness place. You know, so they're trying to fix the body from the inside out by putting hormones back in the body. You know, they're missing the big picture of everything. Because when we sit there and we look at it, is it their problem of decreased hormones? You know, so Menopause, let's have that one. Here's our diagnosis.
No.
So here's our diagnosis. Somebody says our hormones are all out of gear. This is what you have. Go to the hormone replacement place, look at your blood testing, and figure out what it is. Well, okay, your hormones are all out of whack, but why is that? So we look at that, and we have a diagnosis because of our symptoms, right? Dr. Hassel went over this the other week, but for all you that weren't here, this is going to be more of a review. We have a diagnosis because of symptoms, decreased hormones. Body's not working the way that it's supposed to. We have our symptoms because of our malfunction. We have malfunction because of interference. We have interference because of subluxation. We have subluxation because of stress. They got the right idea, but they're missing the cause. So hormones are all out of gear. But why is that happening? It's not because they're unfortunate and their bodies just broke down, but it's because we have the stress that causes that subluxation, that causes that nerve interference, that causes the body not to produce and malfunction the way it's supposed to, that causes the symptoms, that causes your name and title of menopause or decreased testosterone or whatever you want to call it. I don't care what you call it. We got to fix the problem by fixing the pressure on the nerve so the body can adapt and the body can work the way that it's supposed to. Your body is brilliant. That's why it does all these things. But when we keep throwing junk at it and don't get it fixed, that's why we have the problems that we have today. We don't have these weak bodies. They're supposed to function the way they're supposed to function. They just don't need interference. So that's why we're here, to adjust people, to help people out. So what's one of the most, I don't know, what would you say is one of the most commonly prescribed drugs? I have one that comes to mind, but I'll see what you guys say.
Xanax?
Doesn't have to do with stress, just
Oh, okay.
anything.
Cortisone.
What? Huh?
Cortisone.
Close, but what do they give everybody no matter what they got?
Antibiotics.
Antibiotics, true. Yeah, but prednisone, alright? Doesn't matter if you have a low backache, it doesn't matter if you have asthma, it doesn't matter if you have whatever. I feel like no matter what they say, prednisone. Because prednisone is a steroid, and prednisone is produced by the kidneys and also a little bit more by the kidneys. But it's a steroid that is produced in the body, and what it does is just amp up that stress response. So what they're trying to do is shock the system. So it doesn't matter if you have asthma or if a little kid needs a nebulizer and is coughing. They give it to anybody from the age of, I think my nephew had it when he was tiny. They give it from the age of 1 to old people. Because they don't know what to do, so they give this thing that's going to shock the system and keep everything up. But what it does is just creates this stress cycle all over again. And again, they're just missing the main cause of what's happening. Missing the function of the body and the malfunction to get it to where it needs to be functioning again. So, prolonged exposure to cortisol inhibits growth of new neurons. So it means that it inhibits the growth of new brain cells, new nerve cells. It's just another problem that we have. And it also increases the growth to the amygdala, the part of the brain that controls fear and emotion. So again, that's just more of a heightened sense of stress. So the more stress that we're under, like I said earlier, just increases that set point. So it doesn't take much more for us to be stressed. That's why people it's like their bucket that just keeps overflowing with stress. It just keeps getting fuller and fuller and fuller until it overflows. And then we have road rage or something like that, where somebody just snaps.
Wasn't that what happens though?
What?
You just snap? Because they're just constantly
It's just stress.
stressed.
It's just a never-ending cycle of just overflowing junk. But our body's always, stress throws the body into survival mode, and our bodies are always either trying to survive or thrive. There's no in between. So you're either living life and thriving because you found the food that you're foraging for, or you're trying to survive the bear that's trying to get you. It's one of the two. So when we're stressed out, the body's in a survival mode of trying to save itself, because it's given the same response by telling the brain, to release the adrenaline to save yourself. You know, but again, we're not running away from it anymore. We're still doing the same thing. We're just sitting in front of the computer or doing whatever, or eating candy and drinking pop. You know, we're stressing out the body and not burning up that stress by our natural response of running, burning cortisol. You know, stress is a good thing, and our body is designed to handle stress and react to it, but when we just overwhelm it with so much stresses that we have, it can no longer be a good thing. You know, our body is designed to adapt, so if we're going to adapt, I mean, when this works the way that it should, this is a perfect example of adaptation. You know, so we have the stress, it tells the brain, adrenals, release adrenaline, run away. You know, but when we don't have the adaptation, or our bodies are always trying to adapt, so like if it were 30 degrees out right now, which thank goodness it's not, when all of us were to go outside without our coats, our body would adapt to save our life. You know, so it's always trying to do something to adapt to our current surroundings. You know, so our blood's going to be shunted to everything close to our body, and we get frostbite eventually because it's trying to save all our vital organs. You know, or if it's 80 degrees out and we're really hot, we're going to start to sweat because it's trying to cool itself. Or when you cut your finger, the body will clot because it doesn't want to bleed. It's always adapting. The body's meant to adapt, but when we're under all this stress, the body can no longer adapt. And that's when we get that subluxation. So stress, so Reggie Gold, who was a chiropractor way back in the day, and actually recently passed away this year, was a big-time philosopher and just big-time teacher of chiropractic. He used to say that the body would constantly adjust itself throughout the day thousands of times. When the body loses its ability to adapt and adjust itself, that's when we get that subluxation, which is when we get that interference, which is when we get that malfunction. So stress is causing all that, so the body cannot adapt anymore. Make sense? Whereas all my tangents just lost you guys. You know, so just with that adaptation, you know, it's just talking about sickness too. You know, when we get sick, it's just because we've lost that ability to adapt. B.J. Palmer, we can talk about the germ theory. That's going to be another entirely different topic, so I'm just going to brush on it right now. I'm just going to let you know we're not going to get too deep into it. All right, well, B.J. Palmer once said, if the germ theory of disease were true, no one would be alive to believe it. Now, he's not arrogant in saying that germs don't exist, because they do. We know that they do. But he's being smart in saying that germs do not cause us to get sick. Our body knows how to handle germs, but when our body cannot adapt to the surroundings, when those germs are coming in and not able to go through its immune function and immune processes the way that it's supposed to because of that stress, which decreases your immune system, we cannot adapt and we get sick. You know, he's not arrogant in saying that germs don't exist, but he's just saying that it's not the germ's fault that you're getting sick. It's because you're not working the way you're supposed to. You know, we see unhealthy and sick people all day throughout the day, and we don't get sick very often. And I mean, I'm not saying that we're perfect and never get sick, but you don't see us coughing and sneezing and colds all the time. So if germs were the fault of it, even though we're seeing people that are sick all the time, wouldn't we get sick? Isn't it how you're functioning versus how you're functioning versus how you're functioning? You know, so when we make that adjustment and we get that body to adapt and get the body to heal and get the body to handle the stresses throughout the day, then our body's able to thrive and live the way it's supposed to. So when we get sick, it's because we have a lack of adaptation. But everybody's got this impression that the body cannot adapt. That's why we have antibacterial soap, because apparently a little germ is going to kill you. Bigger than a germ. So how do we decrease stress? Function well, get adjusted, eat well, move well, think well. Chiropractic patients who receive regular chiropractic care have 200% greater immune competence than those who do not receive chiropractic care. There's a antioxidant that's involved in DNA regeneration called serum thiol, and as we get adjusted, people who are more often adjusted have a greater, greater prevalence of that antioxidant in the body, and it repairs tissue, it repairs DNA. And so as our tissue is beat down from stress, beat down from everything else, as we get adjusted, it releases more of that, what did I just call it, antioxidant, and it allows the body to repair itself. eat well, eat real foods, eat good salad, stuff like that. You know, but I mean, just eat real foods that the body can recognize, food that the body can use as fuel, food that the body can thrive with and not just merely survive with, food that the body knows what to do with and not just turns it into fat. Water. You know, every one of us just drinks water all day long throughout the day. You know, we try and live by example and set the example because 70% of your body's water. It's not Mountain Dew. You know, and you're not getting any nutritional value from Mountain Dew or coffee or anything else. But also too, when you're drinking more caffeine, that chemical stress, it sends your body into another shock. I remember earlier I said I was going to come back to this and I almost forgot. You know, so as you drink caffeine, it tells the brain to release more adrenaline, which will release more cortisol, and do the exact same thing again. So what you're doing is artificially putting the body through this same situation. So Mountain Dew is a bear, and your body's trying to respond to it. You know, so but everybody drinks their caffeine, they drink their coffee, and they get in the car and they drive off to work. You know, they're not running to work, burning off everything that they just did. You know, so eventually the body, like I said, starts to recognize and starts to set that set point higher and higher for what it can handle as stress. So how many people do you know throughout the day that can drink an entire pot of coffee and they're still tired by noon? Maybe you're one of them. But is that happening because you're just really thirsty for coffee? No, because your body is changing and physiologically changing because of the junk that you're putting into it. And so that person who drinks that coffee and is tired by noon, they're all amped up because they have this false sense of adrenaline throughout the body, and then at the end of the night they're taking Lunesta, and then they're tired again in the morning because they're all hungover from their sleeping pill, and then they have to drink coffee again. Think about it, it's kind of a vicious cycle that kind of is not good for you. And it's not normal. People think it's normal. You know, everybody loves their coffee.
That is normal to a lot of people.
I know. A lot of people think it. Okay, I just need to take my sleeping pill because I'm just so stressed out. Well, why are you stressed out? What are you doing to avoid that stress? Any of these things? It's not unfortunate that you're having stress, but we all have it. Life has changed. You know, stress is just coming at us from 18 different directions, and we can only move 3. You know? So let's avoid the chemical stressors. Move well. Exercise. 30 minutes a day. Lowers your cortisol. Balances the insulin that is thrown at the body when you encounter the stress, and it releases endorphins, so you just feel good. Who's heard of a runner's high? You know, why would you avoid that? You feel happy, and it just burns off all the junk. You know, so you're coming back to your natural response to stress. Exercise every day. I forgot what Dr. Ross said about exercise last week. Remind me.
It's good.
Yes.
No. Like I said, if you go to bed and it's 11:30 at night and you haven't exercised, get up.
Yep, it's time to get up. Time to go. Burn off that stress. Guarantee you'll sleep better. Think well. Handle stress. No stinking thinking. Wrap your head around all of it. If your house is on fire, aren't you going to get out? So if you're handling stress, remove yourself from that stressful situation. Remove your mentality from that stressful situation. You know, don't let that stress overcome you. Just smile. Think of something. You know, smiling and laughter is always the first step towards just better health. You know, it releases those endorphins. It makes you happier. And who can be mad when they're happy? That makes sense. I know it does. In the back of my mind. But there's enough stuff in the world to worry about. And the biggest thing I always knew growing up is that the sun's always going to rise tomorrow. You know? Who cares about the stress today?
Bet your bottom dollar.
Right on. I'll probably be the happiest kid you ever met. So just again, this is our offer at the end. I mean, who did you not bring here today? Who needs to hear this message? Probably not the most eloquent message you ever heard in your life, but we're trying to get there. Just tell people how chiropractic can help them. You know, all of you guys are here for a reason. You all come every week for a reason because you know that chiropractic can help you. Chiropractic is healthcare. This is what the foundation is. This is how we foundationally get there. We don't start right here because we have symptoms and work the way up because we're missing everything beneath the surface there. So anyone that you share with this story, chiropractic, and calls the office this week will get free consultation, exam, x-ray, report of findings. And it's on the house. And I have little coupons for it, so you can actually give it to them, so you don't have to tell them, they don't believe you. So I'll hand them out, and pass them out. That's my story. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
So
Where,
say,
where did I lose you?
what is, when you take an artificial drug, anything
Like
that,
what?
like prednisone, like
Okay.
cortisol, what does that do to like your adrenal glands?
Just burns it. You know, eventually, because we're so, because it's sending that stress response from that adrenal gland, you know, so here's our adrenal gland right here. So the more you take, the more it's just gonna burn it up. Until eventually, it's not working the way it's supposed to. You know, so there's a reason that when you take something like prednisone, that they gradually build you up to where it needs to be, and then they back you back down. Because if they gave you the full dose right away, it would be such a shock to the system that you wouldn't literally explode, but I mean your body would freak out. Because that's what the goal is with prednisone, is just to amp up and put everything on high alert, so whatever you got that's bogging you down, it doesn't stand a chance. But the biggest thing with that is that they're not getting to the true cause of that, because you're not sick with whatever they're giving you that drug for, because your body's deficient in it. I wasn't born deficient in prednisone. I mean, how lucky for me, you know? It's just happening because of this. You know, when you break it down, the physiology of what's happening right here, we can go even farther into that if we really have to, but it's not going to be fun. You know, you cannot argue with this. Try it. You know, I mean, not right now, let's not argue, but you can't, it just makes sense. You know? Other questions? Or did I answer that question enough?
I think so.
You know, just those things, the chemicals that stress the body, it puts the body in this situation, okay? It puts it in this, our
Fight or flight.
primitive fight or flight. I should just write that down so I forget, so I keep not forgetting to say it. Fight or flight. That's our stress response. Happens no other way. Doesn't matter what the stress is, whether it's a bear, or whether it's a Mountain Dew, or whether it's prednisone, or whether it's
Our
a
boss.
double cheeseburger, or your boss, or wife. Kidding.
No.
You know, this is always the response. So we're not always up and running away from the situation, but our body's physiology and its chemistry is always happening the same way on the inside, no matter what is happening. You know, so that's why when you have that stressful situation, you feel amped up and ready to go. I mean, when you encounter a stressful situation, who just feels like going to sleep? No, afterwards you do, definitely. But in that initial stressful situation, you're like, bring it on, let's go. The next person that talks to me is going to get slapped. You know, anything like that, because you're ready to encounter the stressor. That's why when the computer breaks down, you feel like throwing it across the room. It's not just because you have anger issues, it's because the body is trying to express itself the way it's supposed to, but we don't live in this type of time anymore. We have different stressors.
So, you were saying he doesn't want to go to sleep. Yeah, I want to go to sleep, but
Afterwards.
afterwards, my
You're
body just...
exhausted. Because the body's expended so much energy trying to get you up and out of that situation, you know, primitively, if we want to call it that, but you haven't done it. Now the body's just trying to bring everything back down, and you're like, but we still have the results of that cortisol and the results of that adrenaline on the body because we haven't done what we're supposed to do and burn it up. You know, so we can't remove these stressors from our life. It's just there. It's the way it's going to be. And we're probably going to get more of them. That's just how it is. But what we can do is just help you adapt to those stressful situations by getting adjusted, by eating the right foods, by exercising, and thinking well, and avoiding stress as much as possible. But it's going to be there. We can't remove it just like we can't remove darkness or light. It's always there. What we can do is just try and make it more manageable.
So a person who's stressed all the time, then it's, the cortisol is going all the time.
And just
And
building
it's
up.
basically the same thing
Mhm.
as taking an artificial, I mean, is that what,
It's stress all the time. It's the same. It's just happening and giving the same physiological response. You know, so those people are always high strung. So they're always tired because they can't sleep because they're constantly running on adrenaline.
So they take one of those super energy drinks to, because they think
Yeah,
that they need
because
that.
all this is burned up.
Right. Yeah, wow.
And I know it wasn't really talked about,
Mhm.
but as I had understood it, a lot of times it's that cortisol that a lot of times will cause the gut,
Mm-hmm.
the belly fat.
Yep. So it increases that insulin response, and so the body stores fat because it's trying to burn everything else. It burns its sugar to get you out of there.
So
But when we don't burn up that cortisol and everything, that's when it starts to store because we're not burning that hormone.
Mhm.
You know, so it stores in that increased cortisol. Yeah, so,
I'm
Yeah,
pretty
that-
good at storage.
the increased cortisol is what, you know, is going to decrease the cellular reproduction, decrease the hormone reproduction, and just the reproductive cycle itself, and decrease the immune response. And so by doing that, it also will increase more of the wheelbarrow there. Or spare tire.
Is it also maybe a contributing factor to maybe diabetes too, or with the insulin, or no, or not really?
Well, this is an entirely
Or
different
maybe,
conversation.
maybe I shouldn't, okay, never mind, I
That's
didn't ask
that's a
it.
brilliant question. I would say the stress on the body, yes. I mean, this is a perfect example that I was talking to somebody about today. The stress on the body, yes, but it's one of those things. It's like, okay, what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Mhm.
Was it the subluxation that, from the stress, told the pancreas you're not working as well anymore, or was it because the junk chemistry food that we're eating, all the sugar and everything that is artificially making that pancreas work even harder, that the pancreas gets just burned out and tired, just like that adrenal gland.
Or it's a combination, because a lot of times people will go to those comfort foods
Mhm.
because they are stressed, or because they have
Yeah. You know, it's just one of those things.
some
What
type of
came
emotional
first?
response type of thing.
You know, because that stress is going to cause that subluxation, which is going to cause that nerve pressure, and so if that's your ninth thoracic, that's telling your adrenal, or your, I guess that would be your sixth thoracic, telling your pancreas what to do and how to function. Is it that, or is it what you did that's causing the stress, that's causing the subluxation? Either way, it's there. Either way, we gotta adjust it, get the pressure off that nerve, and get whatever's on the end of that nerve, whether it is the pancreas or the adrenal gland, functioning the way it's supposed to. But when we're already in that state, we also might have to change things dietarily, obviously, especially with something like diabetes and exercise-wise, so the body can fight back harder and faster. And I can adjust somebody all day long if I want to. But if they're not doing the right things for their body and helping me out on the same route along the equation, then we're just kicking tires and running in a circle.
So it's just like you said, you've gotta eat right, you've gotta exercise.
I mean, there's
Also-
parts of this equation, we can't just keep doing one part, and then just put, I mean, you're responsible for your own health too. As much as I'd love to take the responsibility for it, and increase my stress. I don't want it.
So with the increase that you see, like with kids and stuff like that, it's because they're inside, they're not outside, they're not exercising, they're not eating right to begin with,
Yeah.
and they're not outside exercising, they're sitting in front of a TV, sitting in front of a computer screen, they're doing other things rather than
Stressing
being
the
outside.
body.
Why the increase in cancer, the increase in,
Just
I mean, it's just one thing after another.
tons of things.
Yeah.
We can go into just lots of different reasons why it's happening. You know? But again, it's like, what happened first?
Yeah.
You know, it's causing what?
And not getting adjusted.
Mhm.
Right. And not believe, yeah.
Yeah, answer your own question.
Mhm.
Any more?